Welcome to the Burns Academy National 5 Maths video for sketching graphs of quadratic equations. In this video, we're going to learn how to sketch graphs for the equations in the form of y equals ax squared plus bx plus c by factorizing them first. And in order to do that, what you really need to know is how to solve quadratic equations by factorizing, how to substitute into equations, how to find the midpoint of a line segment, and how to plot coordinates. So, what I'm going to do is give you the steps. If you follow these steps, you should be able to do it every time correctly. So the first thing you need to do is solve the equation using factorizing. What that does is it gives you the roots of the equation. That's where they cross the x-axis. So you need to plot those roots. That's the second point. Third, you need to find the midpoint between the roots. That gives you your line of symmetry, or your axis of symmetry. From that, you can find your turning point, and then you need to plot your y-intercept. Join them all together and you've got your graph. So let's get started. Technically, I've written this incorrectly. This should actually have a y here. So it should be x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals y. You set it equal to 0 when you're going to solve it. So that's what we'll do here. So let's actually write it a little bit more neatly than that. So we have x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals 0. And when we factorize like we always do, so we've got our factors of 8, 1 and 8. Oh, hello, don't like that. That's too thick. Let's try that again. There we go. 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Keep in mind that if you've got a minus sign here, you need to find the two factors that will subtract to make the third term. In that case, we've got 2 and 4. So we put those into brackets with an x, still equal to 0. Because that's a plus, the bigger number gets that sign, and the other number gets the opposite sign. Now what we did, we set each of these equal to 0, and we solve them. So we have x minus 2 equals 0, so x has to equal 2. And we have x plus 4 equals 0, so x must equal negative 4. And these are the roots that we have for our x-intercept. So we have 2, 0 as the first coordinate, and negative 4, 0 as the second one. And we just put them on our graph. And when you do it, write down the coordinate as you do it. 1, 2, 3. Because if you are nervous and you make a mistake, if you've got the coordinates written down, at least the examiners know what you intended. Now we need to find the midpoint for this line segment that we've created, the line segment from negative 4, 0 to 2, 0. So the midpoint of x is what I'm going to call it. It's not technically what it is, but that's okay. And what we do is add our x coordinates. So negative 4 plus 2, and we divide it by 2. Negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2, so we're going to end up with negative 2 over 2, and so x will equal negative 1. That is our axis of symmetry. That's the equation for our axis of symmetry. Just label it as axis of symmetry, and you've already got that done. What that means is, where we have x equals negative 1 on our graph, we can just draw a straight line, and we will do that. We'll make it a nice little dotty line, and we'll give it a nice color. And so at x equals negative 1, oops, I didn't mean to do that at all, so let's just get back. At x equals negative 1, I thought I had just done this. Let's try that again. There we go. We just draw a little dotty line. That should be right on the line there. I've got a little bit off, but that's okay. Close enough. And that's our line of symmetry. And I'm going to write it underneath x equals negative 1 so that they know what I'm talking about. Now, to find my turning point, all I need to do is put negative 1 back into my equation. So my equation was, just to remind us, x plus 2x minus 8. So x squared. Oops, I'm getting all tangled up here, sorry. X squared plus 2x minus 8 equals y. And I'm going to substitute that negative 1 in. So I'm going to get negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 minus 8 equals y. Now, you'll note I put brackets around negative 1. If you're putting this into a calculator, you need the brackets around the negative to include the negative sign. Otherwise, what it's going to do is square negative 1 and then make it negative. That'll give you an incorrect answer. Negative 1 squared is a positive 1. 2 times negative 1 is a minus 2, negative 2, and take away 8 equals y. So 1 take away 2 is negative 1, take away 8 is negative 9. So our y is equal to negative 9. That means our turning point is negative 1, negative 9. And I can put that on my graph. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's there. And so we'll say negative 1, negative 9. And I'll even put TP underneath it for turning point, just in case. Now all I need is my y-intercept. That's where the that's where the graph crosses the y-axis. What we do there is we take our equation and we set x equal to 0. So we have 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 8 equals y. 0 squared is 0, 2 times 0 is 0, so minus 8 equals y. So our y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 8. And I can put that on my graph right here, 0, negative 8. And now once I've got all those things, I literally join them up. Now this should be a smooth, you don't do straight lines on these. They should be a nice, smooth, curvy line like that. It's missed my point, but that's okay. I could undo that and try again. Let's see if I can get it to undo. Yeah. We'll give it another go. So we'll try. There it is. And they go on forever. And that is my equation of a parabola. So x squared plus 2x minus 8 equals y is there. It's messy. There's a lot of working out to do, but it's not actually difficult. It's lots of little steps. Let's try another one. Here we go. We've got y squared. Oh, I like this one. Y equals x squared plus 3x. The first thing we do is find our roots. So we set it equal to 0, x squared plus 3x. Now, we're factorizing. And remember, really, the first thing we should do in factorizing is find a common factor, which we have in this case of x. So we have x and x plus 3. This x we just set to 0, and then we have x plus 3 we set to 0, which will give us x equals negative 3. So we have a point of negative 3 and 0. So our first point goes here at the point of origin, 0, 0, and the second one goes at negative 3, 0. Now we need to find our midpoint for that. And that's going to be negative 3 plus 0 over 2. So it's just our x coordinates added together. That's going to give us negative 3 over 2. And get this moved down. Oops. Moved down a little too far. So that means that x is going to give us negative 1.5. So that's our axis of symmetry. Our axis of symmetry is going to be x equals negative 1.5. So we can draw a line at negative 1.5. It's going to be it's going to be tricky, but we can do it. All right, so we're going to pick that and put it in a nice color. Why not? And at negative 1.5, we're going to draw our line. It's done. And underneath it, we will label it x equals negative 1.5. That's all you need to do. Now, to find our midpoint, we just have our original equation, which is y equals x squared plus 3x, and we put in our point for our axis of symmetry. So that's going to be 1.5. So 1.5 squared plus 3 times 1.5. Okay, when we multiply these out, 1.5 squared is 2.25, and 3 times 1.5 is 4.5. And when we add those together, we get y equals 6.75. So our turning point is negative 1.5 and 6, oops, comma there. Let's try that again. And negative 1.5, 6.75. Now I know it's an ugly thing, but that's okay. So we just have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's more towards the bottom. It doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of because we're going to write it down. Negative 1.5 6.75. And we'll put turning point underneath. Now all we need is our y-intercept. So we can say y equals x squared plus 3x. What do? We substitute a 0 in. So y equals 0 squared plus 3 times 0, because it only crosses the y-axis when x is 0. 0 squared plus 0 is 0, so actually our root is also our y-intercept. That worked out really well. So what we can do now is draw them together. So we have our turning point, we link it up with our y-intercept, and on the other side, and we give it little arrows to show that it continues. And that is our graph. Okay. I put this one in here because it has a negative here. All that does is flip the graph upside down. That's all it does. So the first thing, everything else is done the same way. Now, you can do it in a lot of different ways. What I do with these is I actually, I like to take the negative sign out until I have actually factorized. So I've got x squared minus 4x plus 3, because when you factorize out a negative sign, it changes the other signs. I can now say my factors of 3 are 1 and 3, and because I am adding this, I can add those to make a 4, so that worked out really well. So I've got 0 equals negative x with a 1, and then x with a 3. Because that's a negative plus, we're going to use 2 of those, so it's minus in both of those. Now I can just multiply my negative sign into either one of these. It doesn't make any real difference which one you choose. I'll do it through the first one. So I have 0 equals negative x plus 1 and x minus 3. And I can set these equal to 0. So negative x plus 1 equals 0. Negative x equals negative 1, so x equals 1. And we have x minus 3 equals 0, so x equals 3. So our first two roots are 1, 0, and 3, 0. And in case you're worrying, if we had done the second one, it would have been negative x plus 3 equals 0, and that would have given us an x equals 3 either also. So it doesn't matter which one you put the negative sign through to. All right, so we have 1, 0 there, and 3, 0 there. Now to find the midpoint of that, we say we add our x coordinates together. We get 1 plus 3 over, and we divide by 2. So x is equal to 4 over 2, which is 2. And that's our axis of symmetry. And we can draw a line there. It may not ask you to do this, but it's not going to hurt you to do this. And if you do it at the same way every time, you are more likely to do it correctly because you're into a rhythm habit, if you will. So let's do our pretty color. There we go. And it goes right there. And we label it x equals 2. To find our turning point, we take x squared plus 4x minus 3. So we have y equals x squared, negative x squared minus 4x plus 3. Ooh, is that right? I can't remember now. Negative x squared plus 4x minus 3. I got those backwards. Plus 4x minus 3. And we just put in our value of x from our axis of symmetry. So we get y equals negative 2 squared plus 4 times 2 minus 3. Now you might be asking, why did I leave the negative outside of the brackets here? And the reason is that there are no brackets around the x squared. If it had been negative x in brackets squared, then the negative sign would have been included, but it's not in this case. So 2 squared is 4, so negative 4 plus 8 minus 3. So y plus 4 is 12. Take away, negative 4 plus 8 is 4. Take away 3 is 1, so y equals 1. So our coordinate for our turning point is 2, 1. This is an upside down one, so it's okay. So we have 2 and 1. And it's going to be really obvious when we do our y-intercept, which we're going to do right now. So we have y equals negative x squared plus 4x minus 3. We're going to substitute a 0 in for our x, so we get y equals negative 0 squared plus 4 times 0 minus 3. That is going to give us y equals 0 plus 0 minus 3, so y equals 3, minus 3 rather, so our y-intercept is 0 minus 3, which is right here. And now we can draw our graph. So I always start from the midpoint and kind of go this way. And remember, try and make nice smooth lines and as symmetrical as possible. And that's our parabola. That's our drawing of the equation y equals negative x squared plus 4x minus 3. Okay, here's one for you to try. We want you to sketch the graph y equals x squared minus 7x plus 10. You should have a graph in your notes if you're in my class. Stop the tape, give it a go, carry on, and check your work. All right, let's see how you've done. All right, so the first thing we want to do is set it equal to 0. So we have x squared minus 7x plus 10 equals 0. We factorize by finding our factors of 10. We're adding them, so we want to add to make 7. So we're going to use 2 and 5. Because it's an add, we use the sign in front of the 7 right here. And that means in both equations, both brackets. So we have x minus 2 and x minus 5. We set each of those equal to 0. So we get x equals 2 and x equals 5. That means that the roots are going to be 2 and 0 and 5 and 0. And you can see I've got them on the graph there. The midpoint for x is going to be 5 plus 2 divided by 2. That's going to give us 7 over 2. So the axis of symmetry will be x equals 3.5, 3.5, which is I've put on the graph for us and I've labeled it. Now, in order to find our turning point, we're going to put 3.5 back into our equation. So we're going to have y equals 3.5 squared minus 7 times 3.5 plus 10. When we do the maths on that, when we do the numbers, we get 12.25. Take away 24.5 plus 10. Add it all together and you get negative 2.25 because it's 22.25. Take away 24.5. So our turning point is at 3.5 and negative 2.25, which is on our graph here. And then we just need our y-intercept. So we're going to say y equals negative x squared minus 7x plus 10. We substitute a 0 in, so we get 0 squared minus 7 times 0 plus 10, so y equals 10. So our y-intercept is 0, 10. And all we need to do then is just join them together with a line. And that is our parabola. Hopefully this has been helpful. If you have questions, please feel free to come and ask me in class. And thanks for listening.